Hello, welcome to the Self-Learning Podcast by Dr. Sushma Singh. Let us start discussion on Unit 8, Ancient, Medieval and Colonial Cities, Case Studies. And our city is Shaha, Janabad, a city in the 17th century. New Delhi, the modern capital of India, has a long history. It is believed to have been the capital of the mythical Pandavas. The presence of Ashoka's inscriptions in Delhi indicate that it was an important center in the 3rd century BC. It was the capital of many Turk kings from the 13th century. The long history of Delhi as an urban center does not have something to do with its location in the watershed between the Gangetic and Indus river systems. However, its predominance and decline seems to coincide with the fate of dynasties that ruled from here. Here we shall discuss the structure of the city of Shahjahanabad, the last pre-modern city of Delhi. Now let us move to the point Shahjahanabad, a architectural journey. As the name suggests, Shahjahanabad, modern Old Delhi, was founded by the famous Mughal king Shah Jahan. Hitherto the Mughals had ruled from Agra. Shah Jahan shifted the capital from Agra to Delhi in 1639. The new city was named after the emperor. He built a city surrounded by a fortification. He also built his palace, Red Fort, and the famous Jama Masjid. Members of the royal family and his nobles built various palaces, gardens, and mosques in the fortified enclosure. The fate of Shahjahanabad was inextricably bound with the state system created by the Mughals. The imperial household located in the majestic Red Fort was the central institution of the city. The palace fortress was a huge enclave. The wall surrounding this fortress was made of red sandstone, 60 to 75 feet in height. It covered an octagon nearly 2 miles around. It enclosed an area of about 125 acres. This place fortress was studded with beautiful mansions, fountains, and gardens. Surrounded by a moat, it had 4 large gateways. Red Fort was not simply the king's private mansion where he lived with his family. It was virtually the microcosm of the empire. The emperor's hall of general audience and hall of special audience were the centers where all decisions concerning the empire was taken. It was here that the decisions about war and peace were made. Ranks of officials were decided, and generals and officials were dispatched to different parts of the empire. The palace fortress also contained a large bazaar, a number of offices for clerks who kept accounts of the taxation and expenses of the empire. Then there were stables of horses, elephants, camels, and cows. Other rooms held workshops where weapons, carpets, fine cloth, gold work, and jewelry were manufactured. There were storerooms for food and clothing and buildings for treasure. Then, of course, there were houses for soldiers, clerks, merchants, physicians, poets, religious specialists, and astrologers of the imperial household. According to one estimate, the Red Fort contains about 57,000 persons. This is larger than the population of many towns and cities in the pre-modern and modern times. For example, the population of the city in Harappa is believed to have been anywhere between the 25,000 to 35,000. The Red Fort was part of a larger city called Shaha, Janabad, a massive wall made up of stone 3.8 miles in length and circled Shaha Janabad. It was 27 feet high. It enclosed an area of about 1,500 acres. This city had masons of the Mughal nobles. Each of these masons were a mini Red Fort in terms of its structure. The household of the princes and nobles would be organized along the same principle. So the mason would contain not only members of the family of the noble, it would have its own set of soldiers, clerks, servants, craftspersons, and small traders. According to an estimate, princes of Janabad maintained a household of about 12,500 people, while the nobles had a household of 3,100 persons on an average. These people often lived inside the masons or around them in mud thatched houses. Now let us move to the next point, market in the city. There were two important bazaars in the city. Chandni Chowk stretched from the Lahori Gate to Red Fort to the famous Fatehpur Mosque. A canal followed through its center, watering a row of trees that provided shade and a place to rest. The other bazaar, known as the Faiz Bazaar, stretched from the Akbarabadi gate of the Red Fort to the city gate of the same name. In these markets, one could get anything ranging from the delicious kebab to expensive diamonds. Each prince or noble maintained a separate market staffed by client merchants. Merchants and bankers staying in the Chandni Chowk areas were not dependent on emperors and nobles for their survival. This will be clear from the fact that the Mughal Empire represented an incredible centralization of the economic resources of the empire. According to an estimate, in the year 1650, 4 princes and 69 great nobles received about 38% of the revenues of the empire. As a result, more than 40% of the revenue of the empire were concentrated in Shahjahanabad alone. It is the nobles and their retailers who effectively created a demand for items to be purchased in the markets. Now let us move to the next point, suburbs of Shahjahanabad. There were many suburbs of Shahjahanabad. There were a large number of tombs, gardens and bazaars where lot of economic and social activities were carried out. Many of the older settlements of Delhi continued to coexist with Janabad. Before the city of Janabad was founded, it was an important pilgrim center for Muslims. It had tombs of saints like Nizamuddin Aulia, Nasiruddin Chirag Dili, and Bhaktiar Kaki. To these centers came innumerable pilgrims. Now let us move to the next point, some suggestions. The description of Shahjahanabad shows that all aspects of the urban life bore the stamp of the imperial households. The emperor treated the empire as an extension of his household. This was an empire that sociologists call patrimonial bureaucratic state system. The crucial role of political power in the creation of cities is also proved by the fact that Shah Jahan's shift of capital from Agra to Delhi in 1648 caused an immediate decline in the fortunes of the city of Agra. Surrounding communities pillaged Agra despite the protection of the Mughal forces. The decline was so marked that the English and the Dutch closed their factories in Agra. We are suggesting that the medieval cities had a large network of trading communities. The centers of pilgrimage too flourished in their own right. The case of Shahjahanabad has been presented to show the overarching presence of political power in the life of a city. It was power structures which seems to have determined the ebb and flow in the fortune of cities. We shall follow our review with a description of the city of Kolkata in the time of British rule in our next session. Now let us wind up the session and take rest. Thank you very much for engaging yourself with the self-learning podcast.